If you love beautiful handbags but you're starting to feel like luxury prices have completely lost the plot, this video is for you because somewhere between fast fashion and $5,000 designer handbag, there is a category that I think is becoming more interesting every year. Contemporary bags. Those are bags given us beautiful leather, strong design identities, recognizable silhouettes, and in many cases, impressive craftsmanship without necessarily charging traditional luxury house prices. And I think that category is especially exciting right now because people are becoming much more selective. We're not automatically impressed by a giant logo anymore. We want to know, is the leather beautiful? Is the design distinctive? Will I actually wear it? Does it feel special? And most importantly, is it worth the money? So today I'm sharing 8 contemporary bag brands you absolutely need to know. Some are already becoming fashion insider favorites. Some offer incredible alternatives to traditional luxury. And a few are dangerously close to luxury territory themselves. And still until the end, because I will tell you which brands I think are best for minimalism, craftsmanship, everyday wear, and that expensive looking, quite luxury aesthetic. Let's get into it. Starting with a brand that has become almost impossible to ignore, DeMellier London. DeMellier understands something incredibly important about the contemporary handbag customer. She wants something polished, she wants something sophisticated, but she doesn't necessarily want her handbag screaming a designer name from across the room. That is exactly where DeMellier shines. The designs are usually clean, architectural, and feminine without becoming overly trendy. The brand says its pieces are designed in London, ethically made in Europe, and crafted with the intention of being modern but timeless. And I think that describes the aesthetic perfectly. Think of bags like the New York, the Vancouver, the Stockholm, and the Hudson. The New York is particularly interesting because it gives you the relaxed, oversized, effortless tote aesthetic that has been huge in fashion. The Vancouver is more structured and polished. The Stockholm has that elegant, understated shoulder bag look. And the Hudson gives you a practical everyday shape without looking boring. What I appreciate about the DeMellier is that the bags generally look more expensive than their price category. There is very little unnecessary branding. Instead, the identity comes from the shape, headwear, and proportions, and that is something I think contemporary brands are doing better and better. Don't necessarily need a giant monogram to make a bag recognizable. If your design language is strong enough, people eventually recognize the silhouette. DeMellier also places a strong emphasis on ethical production and giving back, which gives the company another point of difference. If your style is elegant, modern, feminine, and slightly quiet luxury, DeMellier should absolutely be on your radar, best for polished everyday bags and work bags. Next is Manu Atelier. And if DeMellier feels polished and classic, Manu Atelier feels a little more fashion-forward. This is the brand I would recommend to someone who says, I want something contemporary, but I don't want something boring. Manu Atelier has become particularly known for bags with interesting proportions and silhouettes. One of the biggest examples is the Le Cambon. This is exactly the kind of bag that demonstrates why contemporary brands have become so exciting. It doesn't look like somebody simply took a classic designer handbag and made a cheaper version. It has its own personality. You have elongated shapes, stretched handles, soft leather versions, sway, east-west proportions, and different sizes. The brand's current handbag families also include styles such as the cylinder, gala, tote de jour, and the fold bag. There is a slightly cool girl quality to Manu Atelier. Imagine minimalist tailoring, oversized sunglasses, beautiful trousers, a long coat, and then a Manu Atelier bag. It feels fashionable without looking desperate for attention, and I think that's exactly why the brand works. For years, contemporary handbags were sometimes treated as the sensible alternative to luxury. Now, brands like Manu Atelier are making people choose contemporary bags because the design itself is more interesting. That's a major shift. If you want something that fashion people will recognize, but the entire world isn't necessarily carrying yet. Manu Atelier is one of my favorites on this list, best for fashion-forward minimalism. Now we have probably one of the most recognizable contemporary handbag success stories of the last several years, Polène. Polène was founded in Paris in 2016 by 3 siblings, and the brand has built its identity around sculptural leather work and minimalist design. And sculptural really is the perfect word. You can often recognize a Polène bag without seeing the logo. The folds, the cuffs, the unusual construction, the soft, almost architectural shapes. That is powerful branding. The numero 1 helped establish the Polène aesthetic. But since then we've seen bags, including the Sime, numero 9, numero 10, Moki, Berry, and Tonka. Personally, I think the Sime is a perfect example of why Polène became so successful. It's simple enough to wear every day, but the shape is distinctive enough that it doesn't feel generic. The brand says its leather comes from certified Spanish and Italian tanneries, and its bags are produced by leather artisans in Ubrik, Spain. And when you look closely at many Polène designs, you can see how important leather manipulation is to the brand. Instead of covering a simple handbag in logos, they're using folding, draping, cuffs, and construction to create identity. That's much more interesting to me. Now Polène is no longer the little secret it once was. The brand has become incredibly recognizable, but I still think it deserves a place in this conversation because it helped prove there was an enormous demand for handbags sitting between accessible fashion and traditional luxury, best for sculptural design at contemporary pricing. Okay, this one is slightly controversial because Khaite is incredibly difficult to call simply a contemporary brand. Its pricing has moved significantly into luxury territory. But aesthetically and historically, I think it belongs in this conversation because Khaite represents where the upper end of contemporary fashion is going. Founded in New York in 2016 by Catherine Holstein, Khaite has developed one of the strongest aesthetics in modern American fashion. It's sensual, minimal, a little edgy, a little undone, and somehow extremely expensive looking. The bags follow that exact philosophy. Think of the Lotus, Olivia, Elena, and other soft sculptural silhouettes the houses became known for. Khaite bags don't usually rely on obvious logos. The appeal is in the leather, proportion, and shape. And the Lotus is probably one of the clearest examples. It's basically this beautiful soft sculptural bag that looks almost like the leather has naturally folded into shape. Very simple concept, very difficult to make look sophisticated, and Khaite makes it sophisticated. This is the brand for somebody whose wardrobe is filled with beautiful basics, but not very basic basics. Perfect jeans, a cashmere knit, an oversized leather jacket, pointed shoes, and one really good bag. My only warning, Khaite prices are becoming serious. At this point, you're not necessarily buying Khaite because it's an affordable alternative to traditional luxury. You're buying it because you specifically want Khaite's aesthetic, and that distinction matters. Best for understated fashion insider luxury. At number 4, we are going in a completely different direction with Espinel of London. If Khaite is downtown New York cool, Espinel is polished British elegance. Espinel was established in 2001 by British entrepreneur Ian Barton, and the brand describes its identity around timeless English elegance, craftsmanship, and leather goods designed for longevity. And you can see that heritage-inspired approach in the bags. One of its most recognizable designs is the Mayfair, stretched silhouette, elegant top handle. Beautiful headwear, very ladylike, very polished. It has that traditional handbag energy, without requiring you to spend the amount you might pay at one of the major European luxury houses. And this is where Espinel becomes interesting. Because if your personal style is very classic, some trendy contemporary brands might actually feel too trendy for you. Maybe you don't want an asymmetrical bag. Maybe you don't want something deliberately slouchy. Maybe you don't want a handbag that looks like an art project. You just want a beautiful leather bag. Espinel understands that customer. The overall aesthetic feels grown up and timeless, but not necessarily old-fashioned. And I think Espinel deserves more attention internationally because it occupies an interesting space between premium leather goods and traditional luxury. If you love the look of classic British fashion, stretched handbags, elegant headwear, and timeless colors, definitely look at Espinel. Best for classic British elegance. Number 3 is Strathberry, and this is one of those brands where the headwear has become part of the identity. Strathberry was founded in 2013 and is based in Edinburgh. Its bags are designed in Scotland and handcrafted in Spain, but the detail everyone recognizes is that signature metal bar. The brand calls it the music bar, and it gives Strathberry bags very distinctive look. And this is something I really appreciate in contemporary design. Creating recognizable branding without covering the product in logos is difficult. Strathberry has managed to do that through headwear. You see the bar and immediately think Strathberry. The brand has several recognizable families including the Mosaic, Tote, Khaite, Osset, and newer silhouettes across its collection. The Mosaic is probably one of the easiest bags to recommend. It's structured but not overly formal, minimal but not boring, and it can work with jeans, tailoring, dresses, almost anything. The classic Strathberry tote gives you something more distinctive and architectural, and the overall quality proposition is compelling. Because the bags are handcrafted in Spain, using traditional leather working expertise. What I also like is that Strathberry hasn't abandoned its identity chasing every micro trend. There is consistency, and consistency matters. If you're spending several £100s on a handbag, you want to believe you'll still like it when TikTok has moved on to its next obsession. If you want something recognizable but not oversaturated, Strathberry is a very strong option. Best for craftsmanship with distinctive headwear. At number 2, we have one of my favorite names for a true quiet luxury, Savette. If you haven't heard much about Savette yet, this is exactly why it's on this list. Savette was established in 2020 by Amy Zurek, and the brand creates its handbags by hand outside Florence using Italian leather. The philosophy is essentially modern heirloom design, and when you look at the bags, you understand it immediately. They are incredibly restrained, no screaming logos, no unnecessary decoration, no desperate attempt to become viral, just beautifully proportioned handbags with sophisticated headwear. The symmetry family is probably what most people associate with Savette. And I love the confidence of these designs, because when you're not using giant logos, you have nowhere to hide. The proportions have to be right. The leather has to look good. The headwear has to feel intentional. The silhouette has to carry the entire bag. Savette does that incredibly well. There is also something very old school about the idea behind the brand. Savette says the concept of a handbag being passed through generations of women is central to its identity. And I think that explains why the designs don't chase trends aggressively. They are supposed to feel relevant now, but also believable 10 years from now. Savette is definitely toward the expensive side of this category, but if your dream handbag collection includes brands like the Raw, Hermes, or Bottega Veneta, because you appreciate discretion rather than obvious status, Savette is a name worth knowing. It's quiet luxury without feeling like a quiet luxury costume, best for minimalist investment style handbags. And my number 1 contemporary bag brand you need to know is Toteme. Toteme has managed to create something extremely difficult. A handbag aesthetic that is minimalist but still recognizable. And I think the T-Lock really changed people's perception of Toteme as a handbag brand. It is simple, it is architectural, it is understated, but it has enough personality to make you look twice. And that is basically Toteme's entire aesthetic. Nothing feels overly decorated. Nothing is fighting for attention. The proportions do the work. The materials do the work. The styling does the work. The brand's bag collection now includes families such as the T-Lock, Belter Tote, Belter Beckett, Room Tote, Bevel and Clip. What makes Toteme extremely strong is how naturally the bags integrate into a wardrobe. Some handbags are beautiful objects, but surprisingly difficult to style. Toteme bags generally feel like part of the outfit rather than the entire outfit. A black coat, straight-leg trousers, loafers, T-Lock bag, done. And that's why I think Toteme represents the modern contemporary handbag market so well. The customer isn't necessarily trying to prove she can afford an expensive handbag. She wants something that makes our wardrobe look better. That's a completely different mentality. Toteme gives you that Scandinavian minimalism, beautiful shapes and enough design identity to feel special without becoming flashy. And for me, that's why it takes my number 1 spot. Best for effortless modern minimalism. And if I had to break these 8 brands down by personality, DeMellier, polished and practical. Manu Atelier, cool and fashion forward. Polène, sculptural and recognizable. Khaite, elevated fashion insider luxury. Espinel of London, timeless British elegance. Strathberry, refined craftsmanship. Savette, true quiet luxury. And Toteme, modern minimalist perfection. But here's the bigger point. I think contemporary handbags are becoming one of the most exciting areas of fashion because consumers finally have more choices. For years, handbag shopping felt like two extremes. Either buy something inexpensive and trend-driven, or save thousands for one of the major luxury houses. That middle space has become so much stronger. And brands like these are proving that a handbag doesn't need a giant heritage logo to feel luxurious. Sometimes luxury is beautiful leather. Sometimes it's thoughtful construction. Sometimes it's a silhouette you haven't seen 1,000 times. And sometimes it's simply carrying a bag because you genuinely love the design, not because everyone else recognizes the logo. And personally, I think that's much more interesting. Now I want to know your ranking. If you could choose only one brand from this entire list, which one would you buy? Toteme, Savette, Strathberry, Espinel, Khaite, Polène, Manu Atelier, or DeMellier? And tell me if there's another contemporary handbag brand you think deserves to be on this list, because I may have to make a part 2. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we talk about luxury bags, contemporary designs, fashion trends, and whether these handbags are actually worth your money. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.